Hi, this is Robert Rapier, and this is R Squared Energy TV. On this week's episode, I've got questions about Japan's abandonment of nuclear power, the potential of methane hydrates, and whether gasoline prices look like they peaked for the year. So, first question: what do you think about Japan's abandonment of nuclear power in wake of the Fukushima accident last year? To me, this is the biggest energy story of the year. It's going to be a fascinating experiment to see how Japan copes with losing, I think it was 30% of their electricity production came from nuclear power, and to see how they deal with potential shortages here. How rapidly can they ramp up renewable energy? Will fossil fuels predominantly fill the void, which has been the case so far? And will blackouts and much higher prices be the norm there? You know, after the accident, I talked to a reporter there, and he told me that despite the accident, Japan remains a country with the lights on. All the power's on, and we actually talked about that. And I said, that's why Japan needs nuclear power. That's why many countries need nuclear power, because we want really cheap energy, cheap electricity. If you're willing to pay a little bit more for electricity and give up a little bit of convenience, then maybe you don't have to have nuclear power. And so I'm not arguing one way or the other here. I'm just suggesting that we have to be realistic. If you're going to give up nuclear power, there is a price probably to be paid in the short term and maybe in the longer term. And Japan, how they deal with this will provide an excellent lesson to the rest of the world, how feasible it is. Germany gave up nuclear power as well, but they're still using nuclear power. They're just importing it from France. In Japan's case, very different. They're not importing nuclear power from anywhere, so they're going to have to get by with losing all of their nuclear power and just see how well they manage. And I think it'll be a very fascinating experiment as the year unfolds. Second question: you talked briefly about methane hydrates in your book. Do you see them as having real potential to add to natural gas supplies? Yeah, methane hydrates, it's actually a methane molecule embedded with a water molecule. So it's a crystalline structure. It looks like ice and it burns. And they're all over underneath the permafrost. They're on the ocean floor. These methane hydrates can be extracted, but it's very costly to extract them. There was a test reported this last week by my former employer, ConocoPhillips, where they drilled in Alaska and they pulled up some of the hydrates and successfully extracted them. Now that is methane hydrates are an environmentalist's worst nightmare because the amount of methane hydrates are enormous. I mean, it's a huge resource, greater than conventional natural gas reserves. But when you extract them, it's expected that you're going to lose a little bit of methane, and so that's going to add to greenhouse gases, and then the actual burning of the gas itself will increase CO2 concentration in the atmosphere even more. So, but for environmentalists, the good news is I think it's still going to be a costly way to get natural gas, and as long as we have cheap gas from fracking, I don't think the methane hydrates are going to be able to make much of a dent or make much of a contribution to our supplies. There are several countries that are looking at it. Japan is working on it. Obviously, for Japan, it would be in their interest to be able to economically harvest methane hydrates. And if any country does it, in the near future, I think it will be Japan. So you keep your eye on them. But realistically, I don't think we'll be seeing that commercially soon in the United States. But it is a possible, large supply out there. It's just, environmentalists will not be happy to see methane hydrates be commercialized. And finally, do you think gasoline prices have peaked for the year? Normally every year, if you track it between January and May, gasoline prices are on an uptrend and then they go on a downtrend for the rest of the year. And there's a reason for that. We turn over gasoline supplies from winter gasoline to summer gasoline, which is a little bit more expensive to produce and is a little bit scarcer than winter gasoline because we can't put much butane into summer gasoline. Butane is pretty abundant, relatively cheap blending component for gasoline, and so it becomes more expensive. At the same time, demand goes up going into the late spring and early summer. So nearly every year, this is what happens. The price goes up, it starts back down. Well, this year, on top of the normal dynamics, we've got oil prices that have started trickling down as well. And that's probably going to soften for a while. Always a hurricane can happen. There can be war, there can be unrest. There are geopolitical things that can happen that cause price to go back up. But I think for at least several months now, you're going to see prices continue to decline. I think next spring, barring any, especially unusual geopolitical events, I think next spring you'll see the same ritual. And it may be, a little bit higher than it was this year. That's what it's tended to do over the past few years. It's risen and it's fallen, but it hasn't fallen quite as far as it had fallen the year before. And so we get the escalating prices that rise and fall, but they over time they're continuously going up if we measure year to year to year. So with that, that's this week's episode. Please tune in next week. Thank you.